Hello there, it's David here from Dingle Lane, and today I want to talk to you about a really important part of your cash flow management and in particular your credit control, and that is to talk about the late payment legislation. Now, some of you may already be aware of this, it's been around for some time, but some of you may not be aware of it, may not be using it, may not be aware how to use it. The UK was one of the first countries in the European Union to implement late payment legislation. And in fact, we've really been at the forefront of making this happen. And so there has actually been a statutory right for you in law to claim interest for late payment if you're a small to medium-sized business owed money by large firms or the public sector ever since 1998. When the Late Payment of Commercial Debts Interest Act 1998 Act came into force. Now that was extended in 2002, 7th of August 2002 if you're particularly fussy about the detail. It was amended to allow you to claim interest from other small businesses. So all the businesses that you serve, you can claim interest and statutory compensation debt recovery costs from. That was further extended on the 16th of March 2013 with some additional amendments and so on. Now, outside of the context of industry norms for payment terms, say for instance some industries have a end of the month plus 30 days as their standard term, those sorts of things stay in place. But in the absence of those sorts of normal payment terms, legislation says that the public sector must pay their debts within 30 days. The private sector must pay their debts within 60 days. Now those payment terms can be negotiated, but the important thing is they have to be negotiated within the context of industry norms. You cannot have them imposed on you if the terms demanded by the customer are much significantly longer without additional compensation being there in the terms for you. And also in 2013, as well as the statutory compensation charges, you are allowed to claim for additional fees if the current compensation levels don't cover your full recovery costs. So in fact, you can actually reclaim all of your debt recovery costs from your customers if they're not paying you as well. Now, although these are statutory rights, they're not compulsory. You don't have to claim them if you don't want to. But they are statutory so that if you decide you want to collect them, you are legally entitled to claim that money. You are legally entitled to claim statutory interest and debt recovery costs if people are late payers. They do not have to be specifically mentioned in your terms of business either. It's generally good practice to tell all your customers, and I do as part of my invoicing, I have a bit on mine that say, I'm aware of and I comply and use the late payment legislation. It reminds people to pay on time, but you don't have to. The fact is, it is law, they have to comply with the law. And you can have, instead of the contractual terms, your own arrangements for contractual interest, but purchasers, again, cannot abuse their power. And if they require of you, if your customers require of you, because of their size, require of you terms that are not substantial, the courts will strike them down. Strike them down! And will impose the statutory terms on the contract, regardless of what the contract says. And in particular, where a credit period demanded or imposed by a customer is excessive, outside of industry norms, far too long, the courts will strike it down and will replace it with the statutory 30 days. Now, the important thing to note is that you can claim a number of things. Firstly, interest for late payment. You're having to pay interest, so will the customers. Now, this is not interest up until the statutory. It's interest from the point that the debt becomes late. Reasonable debt recovery costs. So in other words, you're not having to pay for the debt recovery. The customer pays for that. You may have to pay for it up in advance, but it comes back to you as part of the billing. You are entitled, you have the right to challenge contractual terms that do not provide a substantial remedy against late payment. If you have a customer that suddenly says instead of 60 days, sorry, I'm not going to pay you for 120 days, tough, then you can get the courts to overthrow that, because if they're not giving you compensation or a remedy for that, it's illegal. You also have the right for representative bodies to challenge on your behalf. And as I said, you can charge additional fees if the legislative compensation doesn't cover your actual claim costs. So if you start to incur lots of extra costs in terms of taking people through the courts, you can claim that from the customer again at the end of the process. Now, some people will say, well, I can't go charging interest, I can't chase these people too hard because at the end of the day I'm going to lose a customer. Well, one of the things that I pointed out yesterday in my talk on cash flow, a non-paying customer is not a customer. At the end of the day, if they're not paying you according to your terms of business, they are not paying according to how you've charged and priced up that project, they are stealing from you. That is theft as far as I'm concerned. And as far as the law is concerned, you have the right to charge for that time, that money that you're investing in the business. You are not a bank. And a customer should not be treating you like a bank when they have their own bank. And if their bank ain't going to loan them the money, why the heck should you and damage your business, your reputation, your future on the back of somebody else's inability to pay? Now, the important thing to remember also there is that you don't have to necessarily think about it just going forward. You can actually apply it retrospectively if you haven't been doing it so far. A supplier has 6 years in England, Wales and Northern Ireland and 5 years in Scotland to claim for late payment interest in compensation. So you can actually go back over your debtors' books and say, these guys are habitual non-payers or late payers. You can charge them interest for that, and you can charge them debt collection costs for that, going back 6 years in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, 5 years in Scotland. First thing to do, of course, is to charge the client and say, look, we're having to impose this because you're not paying according to the terms. Cough up. Now, hopefully that'll encourage them to pay up on time. If they are still tardy, if they're still playing silly blighters, you can start the process through the county courts initially. It's a very straightforward process, and then gradually scale it up as the time and the process goes by. There are people that will help do that for you. Some trade associations will actually do that for you. I have software that does a lot of the chasing for me, so that I don't have to get involved until a little bit later on down the process when I actually start to issue court proceedings, which funny enough doesn't happen very often, because if you're a bad payer, you are off my books before you can shake your whatever and say Bob's your uncle, because at the end of the day, I'm not a bank. I'm not there to support somebody else's cash flow. You've got to support mine as a customer of me, and likewise for your customers, you've got to have your customers supporting their cash flow as well. We've all got debts to pay, and if people aren't paying the bills, it just stuffs up everybody along the line. Okay, so these are some things for you to think about. Hopefully that's been useful and informative and a reminder to you. If you want to discuss any of these, do give us a shout. Look forward to hearing from you, and at the end of the day, remember, this crisis will stop. Business will come back, and there are going to be significant opportunities for businesses to rebuild and to get far more business and so on, and reshape the industry, reshape their customer base, reshape how they do things. There's plenty of opportunity in amongst this chaos if you're taking the time to think about it and work with your professional advisors and so on. So don't despair. Do use the help that's available. There's plenty available from the various trade associations, the Federation of Small Businesses, your chambers, Road Haulage Association, the Freight Transport Association, all the various trade bodies, Make UK, and so on and so forth. Use it. They're there to help. Okay? And above all, use your accountant. Get in touch, talk to them, work out how they're going to use you. They are an underused resource. Far too many businesses have been using their accountants for just compliance work, getting their accounts and their tax out of the way, and not using them to really help drive their business forward. And this is where we can come in and really be brutal with you sometimes, but also make a really big difference to making your business really effective, really efficient, so that you can really start to enjoy and relax much more about how things are going, get the things that you want out of your business, and get rid of those headaches. Okay, this is David from Dingle Lane. Hope that's been useful. Nanu nanu. Have fun. Take care.